Beneath the streets of the world's greatest cities lies a secret that official history struggles to explain. A vast network of tunnels, chambers, and channels stretching for thousands of kilometers. Engineering marvels carved through solid rock with precision that staggers the imagination. We are told these were built by laborers with picks and shovels, working by candlelight in the 19th century. But when you examine the evidence with clear eyes, when you dare to question the convenient narrative, something doesn't add up. The scale, the complexity, the impossible precision. It all points to a single, unavoidable conclusion. These systems were not built by the people who claim to have built them. Perhaps they were not built by us at all. Today we're going underground. We're going to expose one of the greatest deceptions in architectural history. And by the end, you'll never look at a manhole cover the same way again. Let's start in Paris, the city of light. Above ground you see the grand boulevards, the cafes, the Eiffel Tower. But beneath your feet lies something far more impressive. Les égouts de Paris, the Paris sewers. Over 2,400 kilometers of tunnels forming a subterranean city that mirrors the one above. Every street, every avenue has its dark twin below, complete with street signs just like on the surface. The official story is simple. In the mid-1800s, Baron Haussmann and engineer Eugène Belgrand modernized Paris. They tore down the medieval city and built the Paris we know today. And as part of this transformation, they constructed the massive sewer system to handle the waste of a growing metropolis. It was a triumph of 19th century engineering, a testament to the ingenuity of the industrial age. That's what the textbooks tell us. But let's examine this story more closely. Let's look at what they're really asking us to believe. In 1850, Paris had a population of about 1 million people. Within just 2 decades, Haussmann's workers supposedly dug out thousands of kilometers of tunnels beneath the city. They carved through limestone bedrock, through underground rivers, through layers of ancient settlement. They built massive vaulted chambers, some large enough to drive a truck through. They installed complex systems of gates, valves, and overflow channels. And they did all of this with the technology of the time: pickaxes, shovels, wheelbarrows, and perhaps some early steam-powered pumps. Think about what this means. Think about the logistics. First, you have to excavate millions of cubic meters of rock and soil. Where did it all go? There should be mountains of debris, documented disposal sites. But the historical record is curiously silent on this detail. Then you have to shore up the tunnels as you go, preventing cave-ins that would kill your workers and destroy months of progress. You have to pump out groundwater constantly because Paris sits on a water table. You have to provide ventilation for workers labouring in cramped, dark, airless spaces. And you have to do all of this while the city above continues functioning, while people live and work directly over your construction site. The speed alone is impossible. Modern tunnelling, with all our technology, with tunnel boring machines and computer-aided design, proceeds at maybe 10 to 20 meters per day under ideal conditions. Yet we're expected to believe that 19th century labourers, working in far more difficult conditions, somehow matched or exceeded this pace while creating tunnels of superior quality and precision. But it gets stranger. When you actually descend into these sewers, when you see them with your own eyes, the official narrative falls apart completely. The stonework is extraordinary. The arches are perfect, the walls are smooth, the angles are precise. This is not the rough work of desperate men digging in the dark. This is the product of advanced engineering, of careful planning, of technologies we can barely explain even today. And here's something they don't advertise on the tourist maps. In many sections of the Paris sewers, you find something shocking. The tunnels don't just go down 10 or 20 meters. Some go down 50, 80, even 100 meters below street level. far deeper than any sewer needs to go, far deeper than makes any sense for waste management. And at these depths, you find chambers that serve no obvious purpose. Empty rooms carved from solid rock, perfectly circular shafts leading even deeper, and most disturbing of all, evidence of advanced metallurgy. Metal fixtures, valves, and pipes made from alloys that shouldn't exist in the 19th century. Alloys that show no rust, no corrosion, despite being submerged in sewage and groundwater for supposedly over a century. The same pattern repeats in London. The story there is even more dramatic. In 1858, the Great Stink supposedly forced Parliament to act. The Thames had become an open sewer, and during a hot summer, the smell was so unbearable that it penetrated even the Houses of Parliament. So they hired Joseph Bazalgette, and he designed and built an entirely new sewer system for London. Over 1,800 kilometres of main sewers, plus thousands more of smaller pipes, all completed in less than 20 years. Bazalgette's sewers are still in use today. They still function perfectly, handling the waste of a city many times larger than the Victorian London they supposedly served. The brick tunnels are magnificent. Some are large enough to walk through standing upright. The Victorian engineers, we are told, overbuilt everything, making their tunnels far larger than necessary. How fortuitous. How convenient that they just happened to build them exactly large enough to serve modern London. But when you examine Bazalgette's own records, when you read his engineering reports, something curious emerges. He writes about discovering large sections of tunnel that were already there. He writes about incorporating existing structures into his new design. He writes about finding chambers and passages that didn't appear on any map, that no living person could remember building. The official historians brush past these admissions. They focus on what Bazalgette built, not what he found. And what he found was extraordinary. In several locations, his workers broke through into enormous chambers, far older than anything else in London's underground. Chambers with smooth walls and perfectly level floors. Chambers that showed signs of having once contained sophisticated equipment, judging by the mounting points and channel systems carved into the stone. Bazalgette documented these discoveries, then quickly sealed most of them off, incorporating only the sections that fit his design. Let's cross the Atlantic. New York City's sewer system is one of the largest in the world. Over 11,000 kilometers of pipes and tunnels beneath the 5 boroughs. The official construction history begins in the 1850s, following the same timeline as Paris and London. But New York presents unique problems for this narrative. The bedrock under Manhattan is incredibly hard. It's primarily schist and granite, some of the toughest rock on Earth. Modern engineering with diamond-tipped drill bits and explosive charges still finds it challenging. Yet we're supposed to believe that 19th century workers carved through this rock with hand tools and black powder, creating tunnels of remarkable precision and durability. In the 1990s, during maintenance work on one of the old trunk sewers beneath Lower Manhattan, workers discovered something that wasn't supposed to be there. Behind a brick wall that was supposedly laid in 1870, they found an earlier tunnel. Much earlier. The construction technique was completely different. The stone was cut and fitted with a precision that seemed impossible for the period. And carved into the wall, in a style that didn't match anything in the historical record, were markings. Symbols. Measurements in units that nobody could identify. The city sealed that section. The official report mentions structural concerns, but workers who were there tell a different story. They talk about what else was found behind that wall. Equipment, devices. Things made from materials that shouldn't exist. Things that appeared to be technological, but whose purpose no one could determine. The few photographs that leaked show objects that look almost organic, with smooth curves and no visible seams. Nothing like the crude ironwork of the 19th century. This pattern of discovery and suppression repeats worldwide. In Berlin, in Moscow, in Rome, in Istanbul. Wherever old cities have extensive sewer systems, whenever workers dig deep enough, they find the same thing. Evidence of earlier construction, evidence of superior technology, evidence that someone else was here first. Rome is perhaps the most telling case. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer, is supposedly one of the oldest continuously functioning sewer systems in the world. Built by the Etruscan kings in the 6th century BC, still in use today. That's what they tell you. But the Romans themselves admitted they didn't build it. In their own writings, they describe finding it already there, ancient beyond memory, and simply maintaining and extending the existing system. The Cloaca Maxima is enormous. The main channel is large enough to sail a boat through. The stone blocks used in its construction weigh several tons each, fitted together without mortar, so precisely that you cannot slip a knife blade between them. This is supposedly the work of Bronze Age people, working with primitive tools. The absurdity is breathtaking, and here's what makes it even more impossible. The Cloaca Maxima doesn't just drain the city, it connects to deeper, older structures. Tunnels that seem to serve no drainage purpose at all. Chambers that appear to be aligned to astronomical features. Passageways that extend far beyond the ancient city boundaries, out into areas that supposedly weren't settled when the sewer was built. So if these systems weren't built by the people who claim to have built them, who did build them? And perhaps more importantly, why? To answer these questions, we need to look at what these tunnels actually are. Not what they're used for now, but what they were designed to be. Because here's the thing about sewer systems. They're not actually very good sewer systems. Think about it from an engineering perspective. If you want to move wastewater from point A to point B, you need slope. Gravity does the work. You need a consistent gradient, typically about 1 to 2% for optimal flow. Too flat and the water stagnates. Too steep and the liquid flows away but leaves solid waste behind. It's a simple calculation. But these ancient tunnel systems? They don't follow these rules. In Paris, sections of the sewer system are completely flat. In some places, they actually slope the wrong way. Modern engineers have had to install pumps to keep water flowing in the right direction. In London, some of Bazalgette's tunnels have gradients that make no sense for sewage. They're too steep in some places, creating turbulence that should cause constant blockages. But somehow, they work anyway. And then there's the matter of their size. The main trunk sewers in most major cities are absurdly oversized for their stated purpose. A tunnel 3 meters in diameter can handle an enormous amount of sewage. Yet in Paris, London, New York, and elsewhere, you find tunnels twice that size or larger. The official explanation is that Victorian engineers overbuilt everything, planning for future expansion. But this doesn't hold up. In many cases, these oversized tunnels serve small areas, while more densely populated districts are served by smaller pipes. The distribution makes no sense if the goal was waste management. What if these tunnels were never designed for sewage at all? What if they served a completely different purpose, and we simply repurposed them when we found them? This hypothesis explains everything. It explains why they're too large. It explains why the gradients are wrong. It explains why they extend far beyond the areas they supposedly serve. These were infrastructure for something else entirely. Something that required a vast underground network connecting all the major cities of the world. Let's talk about the construction methods. When engineers study the oldest sections of these systems, they find something remarkable. The stone shows signs of having been cut, not chiseled. Not carved with hand tools, but cut. as if by some kind of advanced thermal or ultrasonic device. The walls are too smooth, too uniform. The corners are too precise. Modern stonemasons, when shown photographs of this work, say the same thing. This wasn't made with any tool they recognise. In London sewers, there are sections where the tunnel passes through different layers of rock: limestone, clay, gravel. Each layer requires different excavation techniques, yet the tunnel maintains the same diameter, the same smooth surface throughout. No deviation, no variation in technique. It's as if whatever made this tunnel simply didn't care what material it was cutting through. It cut through everything with the same ease. And then there are the impossible tunnels, the ones that go straight down. Vertical shafts dropping 30, 50, even 80 meters into the earth. Perfectly circular, perfectly vertical. The official explanation is that these are ventilation shafts, or access points for maintenance. But that doesn't explain their depth. A ventilation shaft needs to reach the surface, yes, but why continue 30 meters past that? Why dig straight down into solid bedrock, creating a shaft that serves no purpose in a sewer system? Unless they aren't ventilation shafts, unless they're something else. Perhaps access points to even deeper levels, levels that the city authorities know about but don't discuss. Levels that are sealed off, marked as dangerous, kept away from public tours and maintenance crews. The few people who have been down there, who have seen these deeper levels, describe vast chambers. Rooms carved from solid rock, circular or hexagonal in shape, completely empty. No debris, no sediment, nothing to indicate what they were used for. Just perfectly smooth walls and floors, and sometimes strange markings. Geometric patterns that seem to follow mathematical principles we don't fully understand. Let's return to the question of when these were built. Official history says 19th century. But there's evidence that suggests a much earlier origin. Evidence that the authorities prefer to ignore. In Paris, during renovations in the 1990s, workers found Roman artifacts in one of the sewer tunnels. Not unusual, Paris has Roman ruins throughout the city. But these artifacts were embedded in the tunnel wall itself, not lying on the floor where they might have fallen or been washed in, embedded in the stone. This means the tunnel was already there in Roman times. The Romans were already using it. But the Romans, in their own histories, never claim to have built Paris's underground tunnels. They write about using existing infrastructure, about adapting what they found. They describe a vast network of passages that already existed when they arrived, built by the old ones, a civilization they knew nothing about. The same story appears in Roman Britain. When the legions first arrived, they found sophisticated drainage and water management systems already in place. Systems they assumed were Celtic, but which the Celts themselves attributed to the giants who came before. The Romans incorporated these systems into their towns and forts, but they didn't build them. They just used them. This pattern of inherited infrastructure extends back as far as we can trace. Each civilization finds the tunnels already there, uses them, maintains them, extends them where necessary. But the core system, the main arteries, those were always already present, always attributed to an earlier, more advanced civilization. A civilization whose name we have forgotten. Now let's address the most controversial aspect of this investigation. If these tunnels weren't built for sewage, what were they built for? The answer might lie not in what flows through them now, but in what flowed through them once. There's a theory among independent researchers that these tunnel systems were part of a global energy grid, that they were designed to transmit power, not waste, that the perfectly circular shafts were not ventilation, but vertical conductors, that the large chambers were not storage, but generation stations. and that the civilization that built them had mastered a form of energy that we've either lost or suppressed. This might sound like science fiction, but consider the evidence. Consider the copper and bronze fittings found in the oldest sections of these systems. Fittings that show no signs of corrosion, despite being submerged in sewage for centuries. Copper is an excellent conductor of electricity. Why would a sewer system need extensive copper fittings? Why would these fittings be made from alloys designed to resist corrosion in ways that exceed even modern metallurgy? Consider the geometry of the tunnels themselves. Many follow perfectly straight lines regardless of the terrain above. They punch through hills, dive under rivers, maintain their bearing with precision that requires sophisticated surveying. Why? For sewage, you'd follow the path of least resistance, the natural drainage patterns. But these tunnels ignore all of that. They go where they want to go, as if following some other principle, some other purpose. And consider the alignment. Multiple researchers have noted that major sewer trunk lines often align with geographic features, magnetic anomalies, ley lines, if you believe in such things, straight line connections between ancient megalithic sites. Coincidence? Or evidence that these tunnels were part of a larger system, a global network that connected specific points for specific purposes? The Victorian engineers who built these systems, who claimed them as their own work, they knew things they aren't telling us. Their private letters, their diaries, their unpublished papers, these often contain admissions that contradict the public record. They write about discoveries they can't explain, about finding sealed chambers that contain objects they don't recognize, about sections of tunnel that shouldn't exist, that predate everything they know about urban development. Joseph Bazalgette, in a letter to his brother, writes about finding what he describes as engines of unknown purpose in a chamber beneath Fleet Street. He describes them as being made of a greenish metal with no visible joints or seams, as if each device was carved from a single piece of material. He notes that they produced a faint humming sound, even though they had supposedly been dormant for centuries. The letter has never been officially published. It sits in a private collection, dismissed by historians as the ramblings of an old man or perhaps a flight of fancy. But Bazalgette wasn't alone. Eugène Belgrand in Paris, Johann Friedrich Geist in Munich, multiple engineers across multiple cities, they all left similar accounts. Accounts that have been carefully excluded from the official histories. Accounts that tell of an underground world that doesn't match what we're taught in schools. So what happened to the people who built these systems? Where did they go? This is the question that leads us to the darkest corners of this mystery, because if these tunnels are as old as the evidence suggests, if they predate our civilization by centuries or millennia, then what happened to their builders? The answer might lie in the catastrophe stories that appear in nearly every ancient culture. The flood myths, the tales of a great deluge that destroyed a previous world. What if these stories aren't myths? What if they're memories? Distorted, mythologized, but based on real events. A global flood would explain much. It would explain why these tunnel systems seem to have been abandoned suddenly, why they show signs of having been filled with sediment and debris, which was later cleared out. It would explain why subsequent civilizations found them empty, depopulated, ready to be claimed. And it would explain why no one remembers who built them, because the builders died. Their civilization was wiped out, and we are the inheritors of what they left behind. The sewer systems of the world might be the last remnants of a lost civilization. A civilization that spanned the globe, that possessed technology we're only beginning to understand, that built on a scale we can barely comprehend. And then they were gone. Wiped away by some catastrophe, leaving behind only their tunnels, only their infrastructure, for us to find, for us to use, for us to claim as our own. This is why the official story is so important to maintain, because if people understood the true age and origin of these systems, it would upend everything we think we know about history. It would prove that our civilization is not the first, that human achievement is not a steady climb from primitive to advanced, but a cycle. Rise and fall, rise and fall. Civilizations that reach great heights, then collapse, leaving only fragments for the next civilization to puzzle over. The authorities can't allow this narrative. It's too dangerous. It suggests that we too could fall, that our technology, our cities, our entire way of life is just as vulnerable as those who came before. So they maintain the lie. They insist that we built these systems, that we are the pinnacle of human achievement, that everything before us was primitive and crude. But the sewers know the truth. The stone remembers. And if you go down there, if you look closely enough, you can see it. You can see the evidence of a world that came before, a world that was perhaps greater than ours, a world that we have forgotten, but that has left its mark in the tunnels beneath our feet. Let's examine one more piece of evidence, one that's been hiding in plain sight, visible to anyone who bothers to look, but somehow never discussed in official channels. The maps. Old maps of city sewer systems, especially those from the 19th century, show something curious. They show tunnels that don't exist, or more accurately, tunnels that officially don't exist. Passages marked on the maps but sealed off in reality. Sections that maintenance workers are told are collapsed, dangerous, off limits. But when independent researchers have managed to access these areas, they often find the tunnels intact, not collapsed, simply sealed, deliberately closed off and removed from public knowledge. What's in these sealed sections? The few accounts we have describe more of those empty chambers, more of those strange devices, and in some cases, writing. Inscriptions on the walls in scripts that don't match any known language. Researchers have photographed some of these inscriptions, but when they submit them for academic analysis, they're met with silence. The scripts are declared hoaxes or misidentifications of known languages, or simply ignored. But the patterns in these inscriptions are too consistent to be random. They appear in sealed tunnels in Paris, London, New York, Moscow. Always the same general script, though with regional variations. Always in the oldest, deepest sections. Always carefully hidden away from public view. It's as if whoever wrote these things wanted to leave a message for whoever came after, a message we're not ready to read. There's one more aspect to this that we need to discuss: the modern upgrades to these systems. In the past few decades, as cities have grown and technology has advanced, many of these old sewer systems have been renovated, upgraded, fitted with modern monitoring equipment, sensors to detect flow rates, cameras to inspect the tunnels remotely, automated gates and valves controlled by computer systems. But something strange has been happening. The modern equipment fails. Not just breaks down, but fails in ways that engineers can't explain. Sensors give impossible readings. Cameras show images that shouldn't be there. Automated systems activate on their own, opening and closing gates according to patterns that don't match any programmed logic. Engineers initially blamed it on interference from the old metal fittings, electromagnetic anomalies in the earth, glitches in the new equipment. But the failures are too consistent, too patterned. It's as if the tunnels themselves are resisting the new technology, as if there's something down there that doesn't want to be monitored, doesn't want to be controlled. Maintenance workers tell stories they're careful not to repeat in official reports, about sounds in the deep tunnels, not the sounds of flowing water or settling earth, but mechanical sounds, humming, clicking, the whir of machinery. Sounds coming from sealed sections, from directions that shouldn't contain anything but solid rock. When crews are sent to investigate, they find nothing. The sounds stop. The sealed sections remain sealed, but the workers know what they heard. And then there are the disappearances. Over the past century, dozens of sewer workers have vanished while working in the deep tunnels. The official explanations vary. Accidents, cave-ins, drownings. Bodies are sometimes recovered, sometimes not. But there are cases where the circumstances don't add up. Workers who vanish from sections that are completely safe, completely mapped, with no hazards that could explain a fatal accident. Their colleagues report that they simply went around a corner and were gone. No struggle, no cry for help, just gone. The authorities don't publicise these cases. They settle quietly with families, seal off the sections where the disappearances occurred, and move on. But the workers remember. They know which tunnels to avoid, which sections have a reputation, and they never ever go into the deep places alone. What's down there? What's in those sealed sections, those unmapped chambers, those impossibly deep vertical shafts? We don't know, not for certain. But we can make educated guesses based on the evidence. First, there's clearly infrastructure we don't understand. Technology that still functions, at least partially, centuries after it was supposedly abandoned. Equipment that interacts with modern electronics in ways that cause malfunctions. This suggests not just advanced technology, but technology based on principles we haven't rediscovered. Technology that might still be drawing power from sources we can't detect. Second, there's a vast amount of space down there that isn't accounted for. The mapped sections of sewer systems typically extend 10 to 30 meters below street level, but seismic surveys and ground-penetrating radar show structures much deeper. Chambers at 50 meters, 80 meters, even 100 meters down, far deeper than any sewer needs to go. These deep structures appear to be connected by vertical shafts to the upper tunnels, but the connections are sealed, deliberately blocked, usually with modern concrete and steel. Not ancient blockages, but recent ones. We sealed them. We blocked access to these deeper levels. Why? Third, and this is the most speculative but also the most unsettling, there's evidence that these systems aren't dead, that they're still active in some way, that whatever they were built for, they might still be doing. The unexplained power fluctuations in cities near major sewer arteries, the magnetic anomalies, the reports of strange lights and sounds. All of this suggests that something is still happening down there. Some process is still running, some purpose is still being served. Think about what this means. Every major city in the world sits atop a network of tunnels we didn't build and don't fully understand. Infrastructure that still functions according to principles we haven't grasped. Technology that predates our civilization by centuries or millennia, yet somehow remains operational. We're like children playing in a factory, using the machines without understanding what they're for, assuming we know everything because we can see the gears turning. The sewer systems of the world are not what we think they are. They're not Roman, not Victorian, not products of any civilization we have records of. They're older, much older. And they're not sewers, they're something else. Something we've repurposed out of necessity, but whose true function remains hidden from us. This isn't just an academic question. This isn't just about correcting the historical record. Because if these systems still have purpose, if they're still active, then we need to know what that purpose is. We need to understand what's happening beneath our feet, not just for curiosity, but for survival, because the civilization that built these systems was more advanced than ours, and they disappeared. They're gone, and we don't know why. Could it happen to us? Could whatever destroyed them destroy us too? These questions don't have comfortable answers, but they need to be asked. The tunnels need to be explored, properly explored, by people willing to look at the evidence without prejudice. The sealed sections need to be opened. The deep chambers need to be investigated. We need to know what we're living on top of. But it won't happen, not officially, because the implications are too vast, because admitting that we don't know, that we inherited all of this, that we're not the first or the greatest civilization Earth has seen, this admission would shatter too many comfortable lies, would raise too many uncomfortable questions, would threaten too many power structures that depend on maintaining the official narrative. So the tunnels remain, the sewers continue flowing, the deep chambers stay sealed. And we pretend that we built it all. We pretend that we understand it. We teach our children the official story, the sanitized version where everything makes sense and history is a straightforward progression from primitive to advanced. But deep below, in the tunnels nobody built, the truth waits, carved in stone and metal and strange inscriptions that no one can read, humming with energy from sources we can't explain, stretching away into darkness, into depths we're not allowed to explore. The truth waits, patient, silent, and someday perhaps we'll be ready to face it. Until then, remember this. The next time you step over a manhole cover, the next time you see a maintenance crew descending into the depths, think about what's really down there. Think about the workers who never came back. Think about the sealed chambers and the impossible devices and the tunnels that go deeper than any sewer needs to go. Think about the civilization that built all of this and then vanished. And ask yourself, are we living in a world we made? Or are we just caretakers of ruins we don't understand? Are we the first civilization to reach these heights? Or are we just the latest in a long cycle of rise and fall, building our cities on the bones of those who came before? The sewers know the answer. The stone remembers. And if you listen carefully, if you pay attention to what the evidence is really telling you, you'll realize that we've been living a lie. A comfortable lie, yes. A necessary lie, perhaps, but a lie nonetheless. The truth is down there in the tunnels nobody built. The question is, do we have the courage to go looking for it?